All right, so we got the lines. There's some lines on the radiator that you gotta pull off because they run to the transmission. This is Eric back here. He's somewhere. He's loosening the transmission mount so we can get started, hopefully rocking the transmission back so we can access the top of the bell housing bolts. We loosened one of the engine mounts on the driver's side. We probably still need to loosen the one on the passenger side. And then...
Oh, I did both.
Oh, you did?
Yeah,
we did both. And by we, I mean Eric did both. So we're loosening the transmission mount, and hopefully that will allow things to kind of pivot so we can get to the top of the bell housing and start the process of pulling the automatic. Oh, I gotta get a breaker bar for the crank pulley, for the crank in the front, so we can crank the torque converter, or turn the torque converter to get the bolts. So anyways, that'll come later. So try to figure this out and hopefully get some stuff moving a little bit and pull the transmission.
Getting her out.
Yeah, it's about time. All right, so it's another day. Time kind of came and went last time with Eric helping me out. We made a lot of progress with his help. We got all of the bell housing bolts and stuff out, but I wanted to get under the car and give you guys a quick overview of where we're at with the transmission situation. And then we'll go from there after the update. So if I can get in a decent position here, the transmission is separated from the block. We got all of the bell housing bolts out, and that's separated. The only thing we need to do now, try to point with this. So this is the torque converter, and it's attached to the flex plate, which is right up here where the flywheel sits on the manual car. So the idea is we can get in here with a wrench, or is it here? Oh, it might be in here. Actually, I'm pretty sure it's in here. With a 17 mil on a ratcheting wrench, and we can spin the crank in the front. We need a 22 millimeter socket to spin the crank clockwise, only clockwise. Spin the crank clockwise, it'll spin the flex plate so we can access all of the bolts holding the flex plate and the torque converter together. Once we get those bolts out, once we get the bolts out of the flex plate, we can actually drop the trans and with the torque converter in it, separated from the flex plate, as one unit. And I guess that's the easiest way to do it. You don't have to like try to pull it out around the flex plate. The other thing to remember is that there's one plug. I don't know if I mentioned this. I was having some hard times with the electrical plugs on the transmission. There's one plug that I haven't been able to free yet. The idea is once we drop the transmission down a little bit, I might be able to get that plug out a little easier. So I'll try to get that plug out as we drop it. I need to remember that so we don't just put a bunch of pressure on the wiring harness for no reason. And then we should be good to go. So my friend Kyle's coming over to help me out today. Should be decently quick. I didn't have the 22 millimeter bolt socket needed for turning the crank when Eric was here, and we're kind of running short on time anyways. He had some plans to get home at a certain time, so I told him like, oh yeah, like don't worry about it, I'll do it later. So Kyle is coming over with the 22 mil socket. He already had one, so I was gonna run to the store and get one, but he already had one and he was willing to bring it over and help me out. So he'll be over here shortly, and we can get under there, spin the crank, and take the bolts out of the flex plate and torque converter, and hopefully it's a quick dropout affair. I'm still working on the pedals. These have been kind of a pain. I think I just need to trim some of the padding on the firewall so that I have a little more space and I'm not trying to squeeze everything in there. So the padding is not super thick, but it'll give us enough leeway to kind of get everything lined up where it needs to be. So I need to trim that, get the pedals in. I'll update you on that as that goes. And then I don't want to overrelease everything I need to do still. What I need to do is make a list of everything so I can keep track of where I'm at. I'll do that at some point, maybe. So yeah, that's where we're at. We're gonna hopefully be able to pull the trans, drop the trans out without too much effort, too much of a pain going on there, and let's hope for the best. So I will try to time lapse that, and hopefully it turns out. If not, then I guess I'll let you know when it's out. All right. All right, so I am pumped. I've been working on the pedal for a while now. If you remember, maybe you don't, but there's a bolt way up the top, and then there's two bolts that go into where the master cylinder clevis comes through the firewall. That top bolt has been crazy to get lined up. I've had to do some trimming of the firewall insulation, which Grannas mentions in the video. I was trying to keep as much as possible, but a lot more came out than I was expecting. So I got that trimmed away. I got that bolt threaded earlier today, and I was fine with that. I was just gonna leave it there and then move on, and I'd come back and finish that up when the trans goes in, because I didn't want, essentially what we're doing is we're tilting the motor back so the angle of where the trans meets up is easier to get to, and I didn't want the master cylinder to get in the way of the engine movement. However, I just went with it anyways and installed it. So here is the master cylinder. A friend of mine, Eric, who you may remember from the earlier episode, mentioned that if this gets in the way, like I was thinking, like I could just take the reservoir off. Realistically, everything else is way down here. You may not even be able to see that very easily, but everything else is kind of tucked away. So if need be, we could just take the reservoir off. Like, yeah, duh. So luckily I thought about asking him, and he was able to point me in that direction, and I'm really happy about that. So now in here we've got the clutch pedal in, as you can see here. Clutch pedal is in, everything's tightened down now.
Now I just need to do the brake pedal.
And then I can start putting my interior together, because I'm done on the interior, minus cutting the transmission tunnel. So I'm pumped, to say the least. The pedals are something that I've been dreading doing, because it seems to be kind of a pain to get into tight spaces, and I've got like a small claustrophobic thing where I don't like being in tight spaces. So super happy that the clutch is in, the clutch pedal's in. That's like one of the big things for me, at least, is having that in. So the brake was pretty straightforward coming out. It should be pretty straightforward going back in. I think it's just one bolt. It's probably more than that, right? Let me look. Where is my clutch pedal? Or not clutch, brake pedal. So, no, yeah. It is one bolt and a retaining pin. Or I should say a pin and a cottering pin. So, let's get this thing in here. The thing to keep in mind, though, is there's like a ton of washers. Hopefully those are focusing. So we need to make sure that those are all lined up, because I know one of them actually goes on the inside. So essentially it's like, I'm gonna try to, one sec, try to explain this. So essentially there's a bracket that comes down on either side of this, and your nut and your bolt go on the outside, obviously, but one of the washers goes on the inside. So you have to line that washer up with your bolt as you're feeding the bolt through. So I need to remember which one goes on the inside. I think it's actually this one here. I kept them in order when I took them out. So I think it's this one. I will double check, because I have that ability, but it should be pretty straightforward, hopefully. A little, at least more straightforward than the clutch was. So let's get the brake pedal in, and then I can start cleaning my interior, because boy is it a mess of tools. So get the clutch pedal in, kind of clean stuff up a little bit, and then I'll put my seat back in. I hate having my seat out. So we'll get the seat back in, and yes, cool. Hopefully this goes as smooth as I think it will, and I hope it will. All right, welcome back. As you can tell, there's a little more space right here in this general area. This is where the transmission goes. That's already out, as you may have seen. So what we need to do now is, if you look right here, this is the flex plate. So this is basically the automatic version of a flywheel. The starter kind of mates up here, spins this, starts the motor, but we need to remove these bolts. One, so we can access the rear main seal that I'm planning to replace also, and because it needs to come off anyways to put the flex plate on, or not the flex plate, the flywheel on. So we are going to get those off. The thing to remember is the crank will move with these bolts, so you want to make sure that your crank is isolated. I don't really know the word for that. Basically, we want to make sure that the crank isn't rotating when we're trying to take these bolts out. So have someone hold your crank in place, or find some way to prevent it from spinning. And yeah, we'll go from there. Hopefully this goes smooth. I guess I should also mention that these are size 14, in case you're doing this at home. All right, so with that out, this plate came out with it. And there we go. I was kind of expecting that to be a little more of a pain to get off, but it wasn't too bad. Oh boy. Well, there we have it. So, here we are. Here's a rear main. So we will get in there and get that replaced and get ready to slap on our new flywheel, which is exciting because now I think we're at the point of everything OEM that needed to be removed has been removed, and now it's just everything that's going in can now go in. The thing other that I didn't mention earlier, this, if you can see this, which you should be able to, right here is a dowel, and there's another one right here. Those are the factory dowels. So when we made up the new bell housing and stuff, we're going to index it and make sure that these dowels, or that it's flat and where it needs to be. And if not, then we will be ordering the correct size dowels that we need. Grannas offers these on their websites in various sizes, so we'll be able to pull that and get the stuff on there and make sure everything's flat and perfect. So yeah, we'll get this rear main out, replace it, get ready to put on our flywheel. Cool. The rear main seal, I just got that replaced. I kind of touched up some of the surface, not too much because this stuff's gonna have to come back off. But I do plan to clean up the edges where the bell housing will meet up before the final installation, just to get a nice clean surface for the final installation. But I'm going to slide this flywheel on here so we can start indexing the bell housing, just like that. That's on there pretty decent. So this is going to be like a rather loose fit. Not loose, but we're not gonna like torque everything down super hard because this bell housing is gonna have to come off so we can get to these dowels and if we need to replace them, which I expect we will. So I'll get the rest of these bolts in here and then we'll start indexing the bell housing. All right, so we indexed our bell housing. My wife helped me out on it. We got this marked up, and you may not, there's a lot of numbers here, but essentially what it comes down to is this is our high section here. And we figured that we were 0.011 out as that being the high. So we ordered the new dowels. We're not replacing those right now, but what I'm gonna do is we'll get another car now. I'm gonna pull the bell housing out, spray some PB Blaster on the dowels, and then when we do the dowel replacement, I'll actually pull the flywheel off. Also, I just want to make sure that my rear main seal is flush and flat and, you know, even. And we need to Loctite the flywheel bolts anyways. It's all temporarily installed just to index everything. So let's get busy.